The cowboy's horse had been missing for 3 days. It returned with an injured Apache woman slung across its saddle, her blood dripping onto the dusty ground like a warning from hell itself. Jake Harlan stood frozen on the sagging porch of his isolated ranch house, the late afternoon sun bleeding red across the Arizona Badlands. Dusty, his bay mare, stumbled into the yard alone, reins trailing, eyes rolling white with exhaustion. But it was the woman that turned his blood to ice. She was Apache, dark braids matted with gore, buckskin dress torn and soaked crimson, a broken arrow shaft jutting from her back just below the shoulder blade. Her body hung limp, one arm dangling, fingers brushing the dirt as Dusty halted. For a heartbeat Jake thought she was dead. Then her head lifted, eyes black as obsidian fixing on him with a look that was equal parts terror and defiance, and she whispered a single word in English that chilled him deeper than any winter wind: "Run." He didn't know why he moved. Common sense screamed to grab his rifle, put distance between himself and whatever trouble she dragged behind her. Apaches and white men didn't mix without gunfire these days, not with the army pushing the Chiricahua harder every month. But something in her eyes, raw, animal desperation, pulled him forward. He caught her as she slid from the saddle, her weight surprising in his arms, fever burning through her skin like a branding iron. Blood smeared hot across his shirt. Dusty nickered anxiously, nudging his shoulder as if to say hurry. Inside the dim cabin he laid her on his narrow cot, the only bed he owned. The arrow had gone deep, barbed head, Apache make. He'd seen enough wounds on the battlefield back east to know pulling it wrong would kill her fast. He poured whiskey over his knife, over the wound, and she arched with a strangled cry that cut off as she bit down on a leather strap he shoved between her teeth. When the arrow came free with a wet sucking sound, fresh blood welled dark and thick. She passed out then, head lolling, breath shallow. Jake worked quickly, boiled water, clean rags, stitches with horsehair thread. He'd patched himself and comrades through worse. As he bandaged her, he noticed the small rawhide pouch tied beneath her dress, heavy for its size. Curiosity won, he loosened the thong. Gold nuggets spilled into his palm, gleaming dull yellow in the lantern light. Not flakes. Nuggets, big as pistol balls. Enough to buy a spread 10 times the size of his. Enough to kill 4. He hid the pouch beneath a floorboard, heart hammering. Outside, the desert wind moaned around the eaves like a dying thing. He stepped onto the porch to calm Dusty, brushing dried blood from her coat, and that's when he saw the tracks. Hoofprints leading away from the ranch, fresh, at least a dozen riders. They hadn't come close yet, but they were circling. Hunting. Night fell hard and sudden. Jake barred the door, loaded his Henry rifle and Colt revolver, set extra shells on the table. The woman stirred near midnight, fever breaking in sweat. She sat up with a gasp, hand reaching for a knife that wasn't there. "Easy," Jake said softly. "You're safe." Her eyes darted, taking in the cabin, the white man, the barred door. She spoke in Spanish first, then halting English. "They come. My brother, he shoot me. For the gold." Her name was Nita. Daughter of a Chiricahua war leader. Her band had guarded a secret mine for generations, a vein so rich it was said the spirits themselves bled it from the earth. White outlaws had captured one of her people, tortured the location from him. When the Apaches rode to stop them, betrayal struck from within. Her own brother Chato, hungry for power and promises from the outlaw leader, turned on the warriors who resisted. In the chaos Nita stole the map and the sample pouch, fled on foot into the desert. Near death, she'd found Dusty grazing free. Jake's fence had broken in the windstorm 3 days ago, and somehow guided the mare here. "Why my horse?" Jake asked. Nita's lips curved, bitter. "Spirits choose strange paths." Dawn brought dust clouds on the horizon. Riders. Jake counted 10 through his spyglass, maybe more. Leading them was a big man on a black stallion, face bisected by a jagged scar that caught the sun like a blade. Black Jack Carney. Wanted in 3 territories for murder, robbery, and worse. Word was he'd allied with rogue Apaches, trading whiskey and rifles for information. Now it seemed he'd bought more than information. Kenny's voice carried across the half-mile like rolling thunder. Harlan. We know the squaw's in there. Send her out with what she stole and we ride on. Otherwise we burn the place and take what's left from the ashes. Jake's answer was a rifle bullet that kicked dirt between Kenny's horse's hooves. The outlaws scattered, returning fire that splintered the doorframe and punched holes through the thin walls. Jake dropped one from the window, saw him tumble clutching his chest. Nita, pale but steady, took the Colt and fired from the other side, her shot dropping another horse. The animal's scream echoed long after the rider hit the ground. They held for an hour, then 2. Ammunition dwindled. Smoke rose as the outlaws set fire to his haystack and corral. Flames licked toward the house. Jake knew they couldn't stay. He saddled Dusty while Nita tore strips from a blanket to bind her wound tighter. They slipped out the back as the roof caught, mounted double, and rode hard into the broken country west. Behind them, Kenny's bellow of rage faded under hoofbeats. Ahead lay the twisted canyons of the Dragoon Mountains, a maze where a man could hide forever, or die lost. Nita guided them by memory and the crude map inked on hide. The trail narrowed to knife-edge ridges, dropped into shadowed arroyos where water sometimes ran. Twice they heard riders paralleling them, once close enough to trade shots across a canyon. A bullet burned across Jake's cheek, drawing blood that tasted of iron. Night found them in a hidden pocket canyon with a trickle spring. Jake built no fire. They shared jerky and hardtack, the silence heavy. Nita's fever returned, she shivered despite the lingering day's heat. In the starlight her face looked young, vulnerable. Jake draped his coat over her. You should have left me, she said quietly. Maybe, he answered. But I didn't. She studied him. Why? He thought of the empty years since the war, the brother he'd lost, the land that gave little back. Because some things are worth more than sense. Her hand found his in the dark, fingers interlacing. Neither spoke again, but sleep came easier. At dawn they rode deeper. The map led to a slot canyon so narrow Dusty had to turn sideways. Petroglyphs covered the walls, spirals, warriors, animals with human eyes. Nita touched one reverently. My ancestors warn intruders. The mine is guarded. Jake felt the hairs rise on his neck. The air grew colder, heavier. They emerged into a hidden valley ringed by sheer red cliffs. At its center yawned a dark opening framed by ancient timbers long rotted. The lost mine. But they weren't alone. A voice echoed from the shadows. Took you long enough, brother. Jake's heart stopped. Stepping into the light was Tom Harlan, thinner, bearded, eyes wild, but unmistakable. The brother reported dead in a Bisbee cave-in 5 years ago. He held a shotgun leveled at them. Tom. Jake's voice cracked. Tom grinned without humor. Surprised? I arranged everything. Let Dusty loose near the Apache camp, knew you'd play hero if she brought home a wounded woman. Kenny's paying me a full share for delivering the map, and you two as bonuses. Nita spat a curse in Apache. Jake felt betrayal knife deep. You sold out your own blood. For gold enough to drown in, Tom said. This vein's thicker than anything dreamed. Kenny's bringing dynamite to open it wide. You're just in the way. He raised the shotgun. Jake dove, tackling Nita behind a boulder as buckshot shredded the air. Dusty screamed and bolted deeper into the mine. Jake returned fire with the Henry, winging Tom's arm. Blood sprayed. Tom retreated cursing into the darkness. They followed warily. The tunnel sloped down, walls glittering with raw quartz veined in gold. The air smelled of damp earth and something older, decay, perhaps. Lantern light from ahead revealed Tom binding his wound, and beyond him, stacked crates of dynamite. Kenny's men had been here already, preparing. Tom laughed when he saw them. Too late. Charges are set. One spark and this whole mountain comes down, with the gold buried forever. Carney gets nothing, I get nothing, and neither do you. He held a fuse in one hand, match in the other. Jake's mind raced. You'd die too. Better dead than poor, Tom snarled. Nita moved first, faster than Jake thought possible for a wounded woman. She flung her knife. It buried in Tom's shoulder, knocking him sideways. The match flew, landing harmlessly. Jake lunged, wrestling the fuse away. They fought in the flickering light, brothers locked in mortal fury. Tom's madness gave him strength, he drove Jake against the wall, hands at his throat. Vision darkening, Jake saw Nita crawl toward the dropped revolver. The shot was deafening in the tunnel. Tom stiffened, eyes wide in shock, blood blooming across his chest. He looked down at the wound, then at Jake. Should've stayed on the ranch, he crumpled. Nita lowered the smoking Colt, face pale as ash. He was already dead inside. Grief and rage warred in Jake, but there was no time. Distant shouts echoed, Kenny's gang arriving. They dragged Tom's body deeper, hid it behind carts. Jake rigged a counter trap, wiring leftover dynamite across the entrance tunnel. When the first outlaws charged in, lanterns swinging, he touched match to fuse. The explosion roared like Judgment Day. Rock fell in tons, sealing the tunnel, screams cut short. Dust choked the air. When it settled, silence reigned. The mine was entombed again, gold and bodies together. They found another shaft leading up, narrow and treacherous. Hours later they emerged onto a high ledge as the sun set blood-red. Below, Carney raged in the valley, realizing his prize was gone forever. He looked up, saw them silhouetted, and raised a rifle. Too far for accuracy, but a bullet whined past Jake's ear close enough to feel its heat. They descended the far side under cover of darkness, found Dusty waiting at a seep. 3 days' hard ride put distance between them and pursuit. Nita's wound festered, fever returned worse. Jake nursed her in hidden camps, cleaning the injury, forcing broth down her throat. One night she thrashed, calling names in Apache, reliving the betrayal. When the fever finally broke, she wept silently. Jake held her until the shaking stopped. Weeks later they reached a small settlement on the San Pedro River. Jake sold his ranch by proxy, bought a secluded valley farther north with some of the remaining gold. They built a cabin, planted corn, raised horses. A son came the following spring, dark-eyed like his mother, stubborn like his father. Peace lasted 7 years. Then one storm-lashed night hoofbeats thundered up the valley. A lone rider dismounted, soaked hat in hand. He was young, scar fresh across his cheek, Kenny's bastard son, grown to manhood on hate. He kicked in the door, knife flashing. "For my father," he screamed. The fight tore the cabin apart. Jake, older now, took a slash across the ribs. The boy was fast, wild. Nita grabbed the old Henry from above the mantel, worked the action one-handed. The blast lit the room like lightning. The intruder fell, eyes staring at nothing. They buried him at the valley's edge, unmarked. That winter Nita sickened, lung fever from old weakness. She died in Jake's arms as snow fell soft outside. Her last words were in Apache, a blessing or a warning, he never knew which. Jake lived on another decade, raising their son alone. He taught the boy to ride, shoot, red sign. But he never spoke of the mine, the gold, the blood. When age finally took him, he was buried beside Nita under a cottonwood. Years passed. The sun grew, married a Mexican girl from Tubac, had children of his own. One day he found the rawhide pouch hidden in the rafters, gold still gleaming, map still folded inside. Curiosity burned brighter than caution. He rode south alone. 3 days later his horse returned to the ranch without him, carrying an injured woman across the saddle, Apache blood staining the leather dark. The wind howled through the mountains that night, carrying whispers older than time. Some treasures stay buried for a reason. Some stories never end. They only wait.